Hello there monsters and men, ladies and people, and welcome to Recharging. The predecessor of the car behind me is actually one of the pioneers of the modern day electric car. Behind me is the Nissan Leaf and this is the second generation. And I'm going to find out if this one is still a pioneer or not. What it is not pioneering in though are the looks. Now I remember the looks of the first one quite well and I was not a big fan of that at all. But this one, for a change, it is not an SUV. And the looks are pretty normal. It's not too fancy, but it won't offend anyone either. What it is pioneering in though, because well, this is just a hatchback, nothing too fancy, is the space. I mean, this car is a lot bigger, has a lot more interior space than I thought it would have. So how is the space in the back seats? Let's have a look. The door opens nice and wide, so it is easy to get in. You sit quite high. The seat in front of me is in my typical driving position. I am 1 meter and 85 centimeters. I do have knee room left and I do have headroom left. Quite a lot of headroom actually. Not a lot of knee room, but my knees are free. What is not so good though in the back, first of all, there's no armrest in the back. So as a backseat passenger, you can't lay your arm on something. And what is actually surprising though is there's a massive hump in the floor here. Probably the batteries are under there, but why is this necessary for an electric car? I mean, the batteries can just be in the floor and you don't need that hump. Because of that hump, it's actually quite tricky to sit here with 3 persons in the back. The quality in here though, what is what you expect from a non-premium brand? Yes, the materials are hard plastic, but everything feels pretty solid. Of course, you have a soft armrest. Overall, the quality is okay, but I'm disappointed by the hump in the floor. So what about the boot then? Let's have a look. If we open up the boot, you will see a boot space of about 410 liters. And what is a little bit cheap though in this boot is you can see the subwoofer just lying there of the audio system. It's just there open in the wild. It is a little bit cheap. Also, there's no false floor or anything to store things under. It is quite a deep boot though, and well, it is 410 liters, so that is quite a lot. If you put down the rear seats, you will get a boot space of 1160 liters, but you will not get a flat floor, because again, there's no false floor and the subwoofer is in the way. But does this boot fit a human? I think it does. If we climb in here, I can sit here quite comfortably, so yes, this test is passed. So what about the front interior of the Nissan Leaf? Well, just the look of it is from a new car from a few years old, and I think even older than this car originally is. I mean, we have the trend of tablets being put up pretty high on the dash. This one doesn't have that. There's still a screen here in the middle of the dashboard. For some people it doesn't really matter, but just the look of it feels like an older car than it really is. What about the materials then? The materials are what you expect from this kind of car. So there are soft touch materials here on the dash. This looks pretty nice. There's soft touch material on the door at your armrest, but when you get lower, things will get harder. But again, that is what you expect from this kind of car. The build quality is good though. Everything feels solid. It feels like it will last, so no complaints about that. But there are some things about this interior that are really not acceptable anymore. And for example, there are 2 switches here for your heated seats that come directly from the 1990s. It's just not acceptable in this, and they look really, really dated. And so what about cubby spaces then? Well, that's not too great in this car. I mean, the door pockets are pretty small. They don't fit a large bottle, only a small one. The cabin in the dashboard is actually pretty big, so you can put a lot of stuff in there, but there's also a little pad here for your phone, which actually has wireless charging, and there is something on your armrest, but that's also not too big. And there are 2 pretty small cup holders here in the center console, so cubby spaces are not that great. So what about the multimedia system then? Well, it's not that great, to be honest. I mean, the graphics do look dated. It's not the most responsive system in the world, and it is not the most intuitive system in the world. You can link your phone through Bluetooth. And now I was going to say that the multimedia system doesn't even have support for Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, but it actually has support for those two things. So thumbs up for that. And there are shortcut buttons here on the side, which is pretty nice, so you can get to your audio with just one press of a button. But again, the system is not that great. There is a camera button over here, and that will actually show you a pretty nice 360-degree camera view of the car. I really like that. There's even a front camera. Well, we can see that over here. But there's actually a front camera view when you park the car, so you can see how much space you have to the car in front of you. I really, really like that. Another downside of this car is the steering wheel, because the steering wheel is adjustable up and down, and not even that far, but I cannot pull it towards me. And because you sit quite high in this car, and because of that, my knee is actually hitting the steering wheel, my right knee, when I move it a little bit to the left. So that is not ideal at all. So what are the specifications of the Nissan Leaf? Well, I am currently driving the 40 kWh version, and the name already says it. It has a 40 kWh battery pack. It has a 150 horsepower motor, and with that motor it can do 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in about 7.9 seconds. It actually has a top speed of 144 kilometers an hour, and if you combine all those things, you will get a real-world range of about 225-250 kilometers. So that is not too shabby. The 62 kWh version, again, the name already says it, has a 62 kWh battery pack. It actually has I think around 200 horsepower motor, but I'm actually surprised that it is not that much quicker than the 40 kWh version, and it's probably because of the additional weight. Because the 62 kWh version does actually 0 to 100 in about 0 to 100. Sorry, I thought I said 200. 0 to 100 in about 7.3 seconds. So it's not even a second faster. I was kind of surprised by that. And that one has a top speed of 155. But that one has a range of around 350 kilometers because, well, it has a bigger battery pack. So what about driving with the Nissan Leaf? Well, the seat is currently in its lowest position and you still sit quite high in the car. The seat itself though is very comfortable, but they don't give a lot of side support. What is a downside though is that I cannot pull the steering wheel towards me, so that means I do have difficulty finding a good driving position in this car. What about the steering itself then? Well, the steering itself is light and there is not a lot of feeling to it. The suspension though, the suspension is made of comfort. This car is very good over bumps. It just smoothens out the road very nicely, and it's also pretty quiet in here. It's quieter than a Hyundai Kona, for example. So you can just see that this car is made for comfort, to bring you comfortably from A to B. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, not every car has to be sporty. But because of the comfortable suspension and the light steering, well, this car doesn't like high-speed cornering very well. But I don't think that the people who buy this car will actually do that. What people who buy this car will use though is the ProPilot functionality. ProPilot is the autopilot of Nissan. It's a little blue button here on the steering wheel, and if you push that button, set a speed, the car will actually keep distance to the car in front of you. It will actually steer for you, keep the car nicely in lane. It does it pretty well actually. It does it better than my Hyundai Kona, for example. And also, this car has all the safety features that you want. I mean, it has blind spot monitoring, it has the front collision warning, it will actually brake when it detects that you are going to hit something. Basically, that you want is there. So what about the electric driving functionalities then? Well, this car actually has 3 modes. It has normal mode, which is just your regular drive mode. When you put your foot off the accelerator, the car will regen a little. When you put your foot on the brake, the car will regen more. It has eco mode, where it does that a little bit more intense. But this car also has the Nissan e-pedal. That is a little button over here that you can press. And with the e-pedal, it's actually the best implementation of one pedal driving that I've encountered so far. Why is that? Well, that is because when you are on the e-pedal mode, the car really brakes pretty hard when you put your foot off the accelerator. And in that way, you have to anticipate less than you do in cars which regen a lot slower or a lot less when you do one pedal driving. And that's why I think this is the best implementation of one pedal driving. Of course, you have to get used to it, but when you're used to it, it's actually pretty fun to drive that way. So what about charging with the Nissan Leaf? Well, on an AC charger, as we're currently doing right now, the Nissan only supports a single phase. So that means it can charge up to 7 kilowatts. What about fast charging then? Well, the 40 kilowatt hour version of the Nissan Leaf can take up to 50 kilowatts, and the 62 kilowatt hour version of the Nissan Leaf can take up to 100 kilowatts. But there comes the problem, because Nissan has decided to equip this car with a fast charging CHAdeMO plug instead of a CCS plug for Europe. CHAdeMO is the charging standard in Japan for fast charging, and CCS is the standard in Europe for fast charging. And this is a problem because, well, at least in the Netherlands, all the CHAdeMO chargers only charge up to 50 kilowatts. So even if you have a 62 kilowatt hour version of the Nissan Leaf like this one, it can still only charge up to 50 kilowatts. And according to the Nissan website, the 40 kilowatt hour version, charging it from 10 to 80% will take you almost an hour, which is already a lot, but because of that 50 kilowatt charging, the 62 kilowatt version will take you up to 1.5 hours. I mean, 1.5 hours for fast charging, that's just too long in my opinion. So what Nissan should have done is equip this car, at least for the European cars, should equip it with a CCS plug instead of a CHAdeMO plug. Then the second thing comes, and that is rapid gate. You maybe already heard of it, but what is rapid gate? Well, this car has an air-cooled battery and not a liquid-cooled battery, as most modern electric cars have nowadays. What does that mean? Well, of course, it's cooled by air, but if you drive a lot on the highway, you drive fast, you fast charge regularly because you have to drive a longer distance, eventually the battery will get too hot because there's not sufficient cooling for it. And because of that, your charge speed will actually go down. So it will go actually slower than 50 kilowatts, and that is a problem. So that makes this car less suited for the really long trips. And again, that is not good. I think what Nissan should do, if they do a facelift of this car, equip it with a liquid-cooled battery, and please use a CCS plug. So is the second generation Nissan Leaf the pioneer that the first one was? Well, the short answer to that is no. I mean, this car has downsides. It has an air-cooled battery instead of a liquid one, and has a CHAdeMO plug instead of a CCS one. The interior lags at some points, and the multimedia system isn't great. Doesn't mean that it is a bad car, but it's still spacious and it still rides very comfortable, and it has a range that can compete with cars at this price point. But that only counts for the 40 kilowatt hour version. What about if you want to step up to the 62 kilowatt hour version? Well, then this car will compete with cars like the Hyundai Kona, the Kia e-Niro, the standard Tesla Model 3 even, and I think those cars do those things that I just mentioned better. So if you like this video, please give a like and subscribe. If you did not, please leave a comment below to see what I can improve. And then I would like to say now, as always, thank you a lot for watching, and to be continued.